Hi, and welcome to today's session on updates for Amazon Macie to help you discover and protect your sensitive data. So, as some of you might know, we actually launched Amazon Macie in 2017. And after collecting a bunch of customer feedback over the last couple of years, we undertook a pretty significant effort to relaunch the service as a completely brand new service to help customers better address the visibility and the detection of sensitive data within their S3 environments. And so this presentation will cover walking through what updates and changes we've made and how the new service works. For a high-level agenda, we'll just start by talking about the quick introduction of the service, go through some of the key features and functionality of the service, a couple of the key use cases that we're seeing customers leverage Amazon Macie for, as well as discuss some of the new pricing and region availability that we have with the new version of Macie. And then lastly, I'll walk you through a very quick demo that shows how easy it is to set up and deploy Macie across an entire AWS organization. So from a very high level, there's four key features that we tried to add with Amazon Macie. And the first one is really important, and it's understanding and providing visibility into what you have out there in S3. And this was a pain point we've heard from customers is, especially when you start having lots and lots of accounts, it can be difficult, especially from the standpoint of someone who works in data governance or data privacy, to understand exactly what buckets exist, how those buckets are configured from a security perspective, and then ultimately what's in those buckets. And that's the second part of Macie is, once we've given you the understanding and the visibility to see all of the S3 buckets that you have across all of your accounts and understand how those are configured, some of those buckets you might want to do sensitive data discovery on. And that is when we will actually go and open the object up, read its contents, and identify any potentially sensitive information that exists within that object. In Macie, we've made a lot of updates to this process. We've given customers a lot more flexibility about what objects they want to target and which ones they might want to exclude. And so it's been a much more flexible process for selecting which information is going to be included in those sensitive discovery jobs. And then the third part is management and being able to do this at scale. So I kind of mentioned before, right? Getting an understanding of what S3 buckets you have across all of your accounts. And managing that across, managing a single service across a lot of accounts can also be quite difficult. And making sure that Macie, for example, is enabled on all of your accounts and set up in a way that meets the way you wish to have it configured. And so, like some of our other services from external security, we've integrated with AWS organizations. And the integration with AWS organizations really changes the game on how you go and manage security services at scale with AWS accounts. And this allows you to have a centralized administrator account that can not only enable the service, but can also create jobs on behalf of members and fully manage how Macie is deployed across the entire organization. And we've made this very simple to do with just a couple of API calls or a couple of clicks. You can be up and running with thousands of accounts under management and being monitored for Macie. And then the last tenet that we want to talk about is what we're going to do with these findings, right? So we wanted to be able to both automate the configuration, but also automate the response. Macie is ultimately going to tell you information about how your buckets are configured and what type of data is stored in those buckets. And we wanted to make it so people can automate the response to those findings in a meaningful way. So that way, for example, if you detect sensitive information, you don't have to have someone who's watching a console in order to understand that you have the ability to respond to that through automation, as well as use our APIs to fully manage or make changes to how your configuration is set up. So now I'll go a little bit deeper and walk through how these different features really actually work. So like I mentioned, the first one and kind of key to a lot of this is visibility and understanding, again, all of the buckets that exist in all of your Amazon accounts and give you an understanding of how many buckets are there and how many objects are in those buckets and what is the total size of all those objects. This is something that has routinely been very difficult for customers to get a handle on. And so with Macie, we give you a organization-wide view of all of your buckets. We also detail a lot of good metadata and information about those buckets, such as how many objects exist within the bucket, what their total size is, and then also what the encryption settings on both the default policy for the bucket and at the object level is, as well as if any of the buckets are accessible publicly, either for read or for write. And then the last two that we look at is whether or not that bucket is shared or replicated with a third party. And what we're doing there is we're looking at the bucket ACLs and the bucket policies and looking for a grant to a principal that's outside of your Macie organization. So if you either give an access to a third-party account, or if you replicate a bucket to an account that's outside of your AWS organization, we will highlight this for you, and we will also generate policy findings for that effect as well. And that's the other key part of this, is it's not just providing that visibility, but we also do ongoing and continuous monitoring. So there's a dashboard that provides you all of this information in a really easy to consume way. But in addition to that, we also monitor for changes. So if somebody were to make a bucket public, change the default encryption policy to remove encryption, or set up a bucket policy to allow it to be shared to a third-party account or replicated outside of your organization, all of these conditions will generate a policy-based finding, which you can then, through automation, either revert or raise tickets or otherwise take action on. Once you've got the visibility and you have an understanding of what buckets exist across all of your different accounts, more than likely, there are certain buckets or certain accounts where you expect sensitive data to live. And having sensitive data in S3 is certainly not a bad thing. Lots of people do it. You just want to make sure that the buckets are tightly controlled and you have the right access policies on them. But more importantly, you want to make sure that you don't have sensitive information in areas that you're not expecting it. And that visibility and that understanding of which buckets you have deployed across all of your accounts can help you inform which buckets you want to include for sensitive data discovery. So it's important to kind of understand you don't necessarily have to go and do sensitive data discovery across all of your buckets. Like I said, especially if there's certain buckets where it's expected or it's understood that there will be sensitive data in those. There's really no point in having us run a scan to tell you something that you already know. So the first step is to understand which buckets you want to have us process. And we make this very easy to do in the console through filters and allow you to select multiple buckets. You can also do this again through our API as well. And when you start to create your job, you get to choose between two different types. So there's a one-time job, which means kind of what it sounds like. We're going to process all the objects in the bucket. We're going to identify all the sensitive data and give you the findings for those. But there might be certain buckets. For example, one common use case is public buckets. I might have certain buckets that I know are public, and it's expected that they're public. And I certainly don't want sensitive data to ever land in those buckets. So I can set a continuous or ongoing job where every day we will get an update of any new objects that are present in that bucket and process those without any additional work on your behalf. So you can set that ongoing job to do either daily, weekly, or monthly assessments of the net new objects that have landed in that bucket. And you don't have to go and configure that to run multiple times. So we'll handle all that for you. We also give you the ability to scope down and control what objects within a bucket are actually going to be processed. So you can do additional filters based on tags, based on size, date modified, or file extension type. And you can do both include or exclude filters on any of those scopings. We also support the ability to do sampling, which can help when defining the scope, especially for buckets that might be very large but have a very homogeneous data type. So if the type of data that's routinely written to the bucket is very similar, you might not want or need to do a complete sensitive data discovery of every object. You can give us a sampling depth, which will be a percentage of the objects that are in that bucket, and we will randomly choose up to that percentage that you provide and only classify or only provide sensitive data discovery for objects up to that percentage. And then lastly, like I mentioned, we have this output of a finding, which will tell you what we found in the object. One object only creates a single finding, regardless of how many different types of sensitive data we have in there. But that finding will include a lot of metadata, both about the bucket it resides in, as well as the object itself. You know, who created it, what account it lives in, its encryption settings, its public settings, and then the type and the number of occurrences of each sensitive data. So if we found 10 names and 10 addresses and 10 credit cards, we will break all of those out individually. We at no point include the actual data that was in the object that was sensitive. we do not want to create new sensitive data in the process of identifying sensitive data. So we will only include the number and the type of data that we found in the findings. We do have a second output that we create that we store in your S3 bucket that will also include the location. But again, at no point does any output from our sensitive data discovery make a copy of, store, or otherwise duplicate the sensitive data that was in the object. So core to understanding what sensitive data is having these managed data types. And so this is one of the key features that Macie provides is a fully managed catalog of different sensitive data types. And this is something that we have greatly increased the capacity of from the previous version of Macie. And it's something where we will continue to maintain and grow this list over time as well. The idea being that we have a managed data detection for all of the relevant personally identifiable or personal health information or other financial information that is relevant to our customers. And so we break down these data types into different categories. So financial information, which could be things like credit cards, bank account numbers. And we do this, we have support for multiple different countries and geographies not as well. Same with personal information like names and address detection that we use through some internally developed machine learning algorithms that allow us to identify names and addresses with very high accuracy, as well as other forms of national ID, so things like passports or driver's licenses, tax IDs, or national health cards, things of that nature. And our full documentation includes a list of all the different countries and data types that we support. Lastly, we have credential information. So these will be things like RSA private keys, AWS secret keys, other sorts of credential information that may be left in an object inadvertently that you'd want to detect, obviously, before it got out there. And when you're looking at the types of objects that we support from a sensitive data discovery, we support a wide range of different file formats. So it's not just text files. We support, obviously, plain text, which is quite easy. But we also support the most common document formats. So things like Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, and PDF files are fully supported. And also, one of the other use cases we see a lot of is processing of big data. So S3 is a great data store for large big data sets. And so we've added support for Parquet and Avro as well, which will allow customers who have things like data lakes that are built on AWS to process and understand what sensitive data is living in those large data lakes. So while we're going to continue to grow our list of managed sensitive data detections over time, there's always going to be the need to identify sensitive data that's very specific to an individual customer. So if the sensitive data is something that's broadly applicable, that will kind of fall under us to grow our catalog there. But most of our customers have asked us for the ability to provide their own sensitive data types. This could be something like your employee ID formats or your customer IDs or patient IDs, things that are not globally applicable and really only apply to you as a customer. And so in order to support that, we've added the idea of custom data identifiers to Amazon Macie, which you can define at your Macie administrator account and apply to the jobs as you create them. In order to create a custom data identifier, you simply need to create a regular expression that would match the string that you're looking for. We do also have the ability for you to apply contextual keywords and also ignore words. And these are really important, especially if the string that you're looking for has a format that could be prone to a high number of false positives. So if you give us contextual keywords, then we need to find one of those keywords within the distance that you specify of the string that matches your regular expression in order for it to be considered a match. Additionally, we have the concept of an ignore word. So this could be very useful if you have documentation, for example, that includes lots of examples of one of your identifiers and you want to exclude creating findings for things like that nature. You can add for the word example as an ignore word. And if we see that ignore word near the string that matches, we will, as it sounds, ignore that match. When you're building these, we give you the ability to test these in the console. Regular expressions sometimes can be tricky to get right on the first go. And we don't want customers to go and run very large sensitive data discovery jobs and then only find out that their custom identifier didn't work the way they were expecting. So as you're building these in the Macie console, there is a test window where you can provide us a section of text. and we will process that and give you the number of results that that regular expression would have matched. And the use of custom data identifiers is at no additional charge. So when you look at the managed data types and the custom data types, we allow you to include all of them in our job, and you can pick and choose from the results which ones you're most interested in. So the next part, again, is managing this at scale. And we released this with a native integration with AWS organizations. Some of our previous services of Macie, we had this concept of an administrator and a member account, but it required an invite and an acceptance process. And with AWS organizations, it really simplifies the process of both deploying and managing this at scale. And the way that this works is from the administrator account of your organization, you can delegate management of an AWS service to a particular account. So in the case of Macie, this would generally be a data governance, data privacy, or a security team. And when you delegate the administration of Macie to that account, it'll get the ability to see all of the accounts within the entire AWS organization, enable Macie with 1 or 2 clicks, and we also provide an option called auto enable, which means as new accounts are created in the organization or join the organization, those accounts will automatically have Macie enabled on them, and they'll automatically be made a member to that Macie administrator account. So there's no additional ongoing bootstrapping or scripts or checks that you have to make to ensure that as new accounts are being created, they're being properly monitored. It'll all happen automatically on your behalf. And again, this can be done with just a 1 or 2 clicks, and this is what we'll show actually in the demo at the end of the presentation. I will point out there is one caveat to this. It is still regional service. So you do need to do the delegation on a region basis based on the number of regions that you're using. But once you have it enabled, again, there's no additional work or effort on your part to maintain ensuring that you have complete coverage across all of your accounts. And then from a management standpoint, if you're that administrator account, you now get to see, again, the metadata across all of the accounts and all of their buckets, and you can create jobs that target those buckets, which is really great from a data privacy, again, data governance group, where I might need to know what type of data you're storing in your buckets, and I might need to ensure that you're not storing certain types of data, but I really don't need to know or read the actual data itself. And so by delegating the ability for an administrator to create jobs in those subordinate accounts, I can actually get the results from Amazon Macie about what type of data is stored there without having to have access to the objects themselves. And that last part is, again, taking action, right? So we need to do something with these results in order for them to be at all useful. So we have 2 types of findings that come out. One is the policy findings, and that's really tied to that initial part I discussed about monitoring for changes in encryption policies, public settings, replication, or giving cross-account access to outside parties. All of those will create a policy-based finding that will go out CloudWatch events, or now known as EventBridge, and those findings will also be sent to Security Hub as well. The other type of finding is for sensitive data discovery. And sensitive data discovery, we treat a little differently. Sensitive data discovery findings are also sent out EventBridge. However, they're not sent to Security Hub. Now, we consider those to be a little bit more sensitive because they're telling the user where their sensitive data lives. There's also a third output that is not really a finding, but it's more of an audit log. And this audit log that we write to S3, which is an S3 bucket that you own, gives you long-term retention of those findings, but it also gives you additional information about what was performed in that job. And we call this the detailed result repository in the console. And this will include a record for every single object that was processed, even those that did not contain sensitive information and thus did not generate a finding. We will have a record that we did check it. So that way you can look and see at this particular time as part of this job, this object was in fact inspected for sensitive data. And for the objects that do contain sensitive information, we will add additional detail that's not present in the findings, which again is the location of where we found the sensitive data inside that object. So if you need to go do a deeper dive and actually see what was the actual information that was found, you have now the location, which will be like a line number or a record ID. So that way you can quickly and easily identify the sensitive data inside the object. So kind of use cases that we've seen talking to customers so far, right? The first and obvious one is, data privacy and security, and making sure that you have the right data security applied to the different types of objects that you're storing. And this is really important because it's hard to understand how you're going to configure your buckets for your most sensitive data if you're not sure whether or not there's sensitive data in it. And so by combining the ability to monitor those buckets for the different configuration settings with the ability to actually inspect the contents within them, it allows you to make sure that as sensitive data is discovered, it's only in places either that you expect it to be or that the buckets that it's stored in have the proper level of security controls on them. This obviously leads and is very helpful with a number of different compliance regimes. So maintaining regulatory compliance often requires that you have an understanding and you've properly controlled access to sensitive data, that either whether or not it's customer data or other data that's covered under certain regulatory requirements. And so Macie can really help a lot of customers as a part of their overall data governance and compliance programs. And then kind of the last use case I want to cover is data migration. So this is one that we've seen more and more customers start to leverage Macie for recently. And the idea is while Macie only works with S3 today, there are a lot of tools that can place data into S3 as a part of the data migration process. So for example, if you're migrating a database or a data lake from an on-prem to Amazon, you can first place it into an Amazon S3 bucket that's tightly controlled. Consider like a secure S3 bucket that is only accessible to Amazon Macie, and have that data processed before you go and place it into other locations. So this will allow you and inform those decisions of, does this particular data set need to be into a highly controlled environment, or is this something that we can allow developers to have access to, for example? So using Macie to inform and discover sensitive data as part of the migration strategy is another use case that we've seen a lot of customers find very useful. And then lastly, just a word about pricing. So when we launched Amazon Macie 2017, the price point was a little bit higher, it was a little bit high. And so we got some feedback on that from customers. And as part of this relaunch of the new service, we've lowered the base price by 80% for sensitive data discovery and by 95% at very large data set sizes. We've also added a free trial for the bucket inventory and monitoring. So as part of this relaunch, we separated out and made the pricing a lot easier to understand. There's two components, and one is the number of buckets that you have being monitored, and that's 10 cents per bucket per month. That is included in the first month for every account for free as part of the free trial. As part of the free trial, it does not include any sensitive data discovery. However, we do give every account a perpetual 1 gigabyte free every month. So this makes it very easy for customers to go and get started and do so at scale. You can enable this across all of your accounts, and that bucket monitoring, of course, is free for that first month. And then from that, you can evaluate which of those buckets that you wish to do sensitive data discovery on. So now I'll just do a quick demo that shows you just how easy it is to start with a very brand new account and deploy Macie and get set up across all of the accounts in your organization. All right, as you can see here, I am at the Amazon Macie service page, and I have not enabled the service at all in this account. It is in a AWS organization. And I am at the organization master account. And so when I'm enabling this now, I have this option that is only available because I'm at the organization level, which asks me if I want to delegate control of Macie to a particular account. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and delegate to myself. In general practice, you would pick a different account. Generally, like I said, something in the data privacy or data governance group. Once you've performed the delegation, it will do a couple things. It will first enable Macie on that particular account. And then it also gives that account the ability to perform protected API calls to list the different accounts that are in your organization, as well as, again, to manage all of the accounts that I have. So like I said, this is a fairly new setup I created. I only have a handful of accounts, but if you had 3 or 3,000 accounts, this process is effectively the same. So in order to get started, my first step would be to select my existing accounts and enable Macie on them. So again, you can select all. It doesn't matter if you have 2 or 2,000. It'll go ahead and work through all those accounts. And you'll see it'll go to an enabling in process. And after a couple seconds, those accounts will be fully enabled. Now, in order to make it so I don't have to go back and forth and do this all the time, again, here's the option for auto enable. When I turn on the auto enable function, I'm telling Macie that every time a new account joins this organization, I wish to have it be monitored by Macie. So I no longer have to go and deal with any management or scripts or bootstrapping in order to get my accounts set up with Macie. All right, so that completes the short demo I wanted to show you about how easy it is to go ahead and get started. As I mentioned, you can get ready and deploy this across your accounts and get the bucket monitoring and inventorying for free for the first 30 days. Simply go to aws.amazon.com/Macie and hit the Get Started button to start your Amazon Macie free trial. So I want to thank everyone for watching today's session, and please do fill out our survey and let us know how we're doing. This is how we learn how to make these sessions better for you. Thank you.